quite a while. Got a bunch of kids doing faith in style. They'll tell you that you're awesome and you're not alone. So let's start the show. Who knew Catholics could be so much fun? Greg and Jennifer and how faith is done. Screwing up and trying and forgiving. Adventures in imperfect living. Adventures in imperfect living.
Greetings, folks. My name is Greg Willits from RosaryArmy.com.
And I am Jennifer Willits, his wife.
Coming up on this episode, lots of changes, lots of things. We're in the brand new De Montfort Studios.
Is that what we're calling it now?
Well, that's what I'm calling it. I set it on the Google Assist thing because I have all sorts of Google plugs in here now. So when I can walk in, I can say, hey, okay, you know that thing. And then I can tell it to do different things and different lights will go on and different settings. And I'm still working on all that stuff. But I originally had it, De Montfort Studios was the name of it. But then the problem is every time I walked in and I wanted to say studio on, I had to say De Montfort Studio.
You have to be careful even saying that phrase right now. You might turn off half of our studio while we're using it actively.
Obviously, we don't want that. So, hey, I mean, so many different directions that we can go right now. Happy New Year to you. Happy secular humanism world New Year to you. It's January 2nd as we're recording this episode. We are back in real time, you could say, because we'll record the show and then we'll post the show right away. And
don't get used to that now.
Well, I
might, but I don't know.
I really liked having everything banked for a few weeks. That was super nice. But we had to because we were doing the giving campaign. The giving campaign, the official 20th anniversary giving campaign, Advent giving campaign is over. I won't say there won't be a Lent giving campaign. Because
it's kind of an ongoing thing. We
didn't meet our goal, but my goodness gracious, if you weren't getting the Rosary Army emails, and I haven't fully updated it. We had like one more donation crept in today that I didn't add to the list yet, but we made it up to. I'm looking at the tally right now. Yeah, we made it up to $133,195 for Rosary Army.
Praise God.
And that is going to allow us to do things like this studio, building up School of Mary, to be able to create more different content. We are doing a video of this right now. I might release this, just so you know. I know you didn't do your hair, and you didn't like that.
You know what? This is the humility camera.
But look
the litany of humility camera.
Look how great you look. You're super shiny, beautiful. Early in the morning right now. You look great right now.
Fresh out of the shower. Just washed my hair.
Listen.
There is no perfect hair and face makeup thing going on here. It's just get out of the shower.
A lot of 52-year-old guys who would love to have a 52-year-old wife who looks as good as you.
Oh, well, they better not be saying that. They better love the 52-year-old wife they have. Don't you dare be looking at me.
That's fair point. Yeah, don't you dare be looking at my wife. But the reason why I say this is because I mean we've been working our tails off behind the scenes, and I don't say this to brag, but to let you know it's something pretty exciting to look forward to. And we have been working on this studio so that we can start doing video and audio. And if you're watching this video right now, you see a screen in back of us that's kind of rotating through some of the shows that we do.
Isn't that nice? It's so pretty.
And eventually I'll have a permanent setup. You know, if it's Adventures in Imperfect Living, it will show in the back. My goal is whatever the topic is that we're talking about, I can hit a button and boof. It's boof. Boof. Not poof, because we don't believe in magic. Magic is of the devil. So boof.
Fair term.
The images will appear of what we're talking about in the back. If I'm smart, I might even have like a show image already done in advance, and that's what's going to be up. And so a lot of production stuff. The great thing about raising the money is we're going to be able to start learning how to hire people to help us in some of the production aspects of it so that it's not all 1,000 things that have to get done
by Greg Willits.
By Greg Willits
right.
on a Monday morning.
So right now, the video presentation we're using right now is for the Adventures podcast, where we're both basically sharing the same camera. And instead of having a dedicated camera just on your face for when you're speaking and mine.
I think it looks great.
Yeah, and so this is the same presentation we'll use for catechism class.
Catechism class. Yeah, catechism class might be a little bit different, and here's why. And that I might set up the two camera thing in a slightly different way, so that because unless you want to be on camera the whole time that I'm just talking, and so that you're just sitting there. So
Yeah,
if
that
you
would
wanna,
be too much.
Yeah, and so if you're drinking coffee or whatever, so I'm figuring out that a different color scheme, so it looks different when you watch the video. So like right now, I got blue going on, but in the background, because of the images that are on the screen, as I'm saying this right now, the show image for what we're dealing with, which is the podcast that we were doing with our friends Mac and Catherine. We haven't done one since the coronavirus hit. But our plan is, and that was part of the inspiration of this studio, that we can actually have 4 people sitting comfortably in chairs recording and have a coffee time. People have told both of our shows for so many years, hanging out with you guys is like sitting around with friends drinking coffee. So we set it up so that it'll feel like we're sitting around drinking coffee. And we're going to start recording what we're dealing with soon. We're going to be doing more things for Rosary Army, for School of Mary. Obviously, we're planning our first courses on that. I'm still debating on that. Let's talk about that a little bit for School of Mary. I've had a lot of things in my head, but you and I haven't had a chance to really sit down and talk.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have in my mind, I have 2 things in my mind of what I would like to kick off officially School of Mary. And what School of Mary will be is, in my mind, something that you would actually be able to sign up for, and you would be enrolled into this online community where you could have access. Some of it will be free, and some of it you can sign up and pay an extra fee to be a part of certain things to help us to cover the expenses of it, because obviously we didn't raise all the money that we needed to build everything out. And so we're going to need to have other revenue streams. And one of them will be School of Mary will be, if I do a certain course, or if you and I are going to make ourselves available every day for a 33-day preparation of consecration or something like that, that's something that Rosary Army could benefit from. And then we can eventually train other people that could be leaders in escorting people through total consecration. These are all ideas that we have for School of Mary. But out of the gate, I would like to offer a couple of the free things that everyone would have access to, and one of them would just be the total consecration stuff. That wouldn't necessarily be us escorting people through, but here it is, and maybe we have discussions. So the idea I had, and it's a morphing of several different things that you and I have talked about, is we could sit down and kind of do what we're doing right now, and we could read through the day and record us reading through the day, so there's a video and audio of it. But then we do, right after that, we could do a very brief 5 to 10 minute discussion of what does that mean to you? What did you get out of that? What are the challenging areas? So that we can then play the role of people going through it for the first time, because I think that's really critical. And so then we're sort of anticipating in advance, and this would just be our first version of this. It's not like I don't want to look at our resources for total consecration being one and done. I want to look at this as people are constantly going to be asking new questions, bringing new concerns that they have. I struggled with this, and I want us to be addressing those kinds of things, and that would be part of School of Mary. So it's going through St. Louis de Montfort's total consecration stuff. But at the same time, I really want to develop a course on the love of eternal wisdom, because he said it's his most important work, even more important than true devotion, because it actually leads to true devotion. True devotion is, okay, if you want to have Jesus Christ in your life, how do you get there easy? It's through Mary. And so true devotion supplements eternal wisdom, not the other way around. And it's a very rich, deep work that I also feel like we could spend a lot of time going over the chapters over and over and over again and really turn that into a study that's a part of School of Mary. Then people who are enrolled can ask questions, and then in future parts we can actually talk about those questions, right? That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. A little bit more like a course. So right out of the gate, knowing that my personal, right? So I do it a little bit selfishly. Everything that we do is a little bit selfishly. My personal renewal of consecration for my 20th anniversary since I was consecrated is coming up. It starts in end of February, ends March 25th. So I just feel like I'm going to be going through it anyway. I want to do an extra good job this time around, unlike the other 20 times I've done it. I haven't done it 20 times. I should have done it 20 times. I didn't do it 20 times. I've done it a bunch. I didn't do it 20 times. So I got to make up for it, right?
Well, but honestly, that's one of the things that we would cover is that reality right there.
Of renewing, yeah.
Because not everybody will renew every year, and why not? Why don't we do this? And like you, I will also be renewing in the same season so that it culminates on March 25th. So that was what I did last year, and so I'm going to make that my new anniversary date.
You're just kind of, because you actually did it with Louis de Montfort. You did it with his April 28th feast day.
Like the first
time, yeah.
Almost
Coincided
19
with that.
years ago.
Which is still a pretty good date,
Yeah.
you know? And so that's that idea. And then, of course, one of the things that we've worked really hard in developing the studio, we wanted it to be very flexible so that we can come in and set up quickly and do different things without having to break everything down again. And so I wish I could show on video, and I'm going to do a separate tour and share it with our donors and supporters of Rosary Army. And I'll send them a link. And so if you're a donor and supporter, you go on a list, and that's kind of what we're moving things to with Patreon. Is like eventually it's like we're going to be saying, rather than if you're a patron of Greg and Jennifer, if you're a donor of Rosary Army, and patrons, I'll send it to you as well. So we're in this crossover time right now. So patrons will get it, and then donors of Rosary Army, I'll send out a link and say, hey, I just wanted to show you a tour of the studio. Because it's super fun. To me, I love aesthetics, but I also love clean. I love things being hidden away. Like right before we started, you said, well, we should put some tape on the floor to mark where this thing goes. And I'm like, I don't want that because that will drive me nuts. Now, a little piece of tape might be okay, but a Post-it note, I can't stand Post-it notes.
I would never suggest
just Post-it notes. Man.
Such a thing. I know
because
how
once
you
they're
feel.
there, you don't see them anymore. But like little gaffer tape that's very, very small, I might be okay with that. But it would drive me nuts. It would drive me nuts still. But what we can do like right now, if you are watching the video, if I put this out, if everything goes well, I don't know, this is the first time that we've tried to use 3 cameras set up simultaneously with all of our lights. What I can do is, if you're looking at this, I can show you our different camera setups. So it's like, here's the second camera. So there's a camera that's pointing right towards the couch. You get a slightly different angle of the TV. You can imagine that if this is where we could sit when we're praying the rosary, I can actually turn on the lights.
Can you turn on that light?
Yeah. So if I turn on that light in the background, then so that would be light.
The one behind you.
Yeah. No, that's light number 2. See, light. This is set up 1, 2, 3. Those are the numbers. 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
So if I turn on light 2, it shines up right on that. It's a little bright. You know, we'd want to get it, a little bit
but for some
cleaner.
For some shows, you need that brightness.
But praying the rosary
Beautiful.
or something, I can change the lights at the background of the wall and that kind of thing. And then the third, this is not a good setup. I just literally just popped up the camera and said, there's the other setup. So it's basically 3 camera setup so that I can switch at any time while we're recording. If I want to put something up on the screen, I can also do that. I can have my laptop, or I can have my iPad set up as one of the fourth inputs. And so if I'm doing a slideshow, right, and which makes sense. Think about total consecration. If we're sitting there praying it, I can hit a button and the words go up on the screen of what we're praying. If we want to start praying Latin rosaries, if we want to do live stream rosaries, that's the other thing that we want to start doing very, very soon, like this month. Start doing live rosaries on Rosary Army's YouTube channel again. But all of the things that we're doing, all the podcasts, everything else, it's now underneath that banner of Rosary Army. And one of the things that we have at least raised up enough money that I'm going to be able to contract some company, I still don't know which one yet, to be able to help us to build it up and to develop truly a marketing plan that's going to be able to reach out to people in a way that I can't do it, so that we have some level of assistance of people saying, hey, I could tell them, here's when we're going to pray the rosaries, and they're going to get the word out. And we're going to start having more people joining us praying the rosaries. We're going to have more people watching these videos. They'll be able to take this longer video and cut it up into smaller bits and pieces. And same thing with all the shows that we do. If we say something really meaningful, like right now, is this meaningful? No. Does everyone want to see us? No. Some people want to watch the whole thing. But we might talk about something in the middle of this, a 5 or 10 minute segment on our Blessed Mother or on some teaching of the church. It's really great. And then to have that help for someone to go in there and take that, cut it, stick that out on Rosary Army's feed, just very excited. So we're going to continue to try to raise the funds that we need, not as actively as we did during the giving campaign. I'm not sending out emails every few days, so thank you for your patience with that. I want to get back to the teaching. I want to get back to helping people. I want to accompany people to a greater closeness with Jesus Christ through His Blessed Mother. That's what we do. That's what gets me excited.
And I also want to give a big shout out to the Barron's offspring, the one and only Ben Barron, who came over on multiple occasions, maybe 2 or 3 times, to help you do all of this studio setup. So he was a huge help to Greg. And he is just such a delightful young man. He's got such a great work ethic. He's always happy. And he's just eager. And I love that. I love that about Ben Barron. And he was very, very instrumental for Greg in just getting the cable managed and helping with the setup, because he understands this world very, very much. So we're just very, very appreciative for his help. And
Can I speak on that, or are you
yeah,
gonna move on
no,
to something
no,
else?
go ahead.
With Ben helping, and it's such a weird thing. So there's so much of this is new, and so much of this is old school, right? We've been podcasting for going on 18 years. We started doing video stuff years ago with that Catholic show, but you know this, the technology changes so quickly, and with the YouTube world now, the equipment and setups and everything are constantly evolving on a daily basis. And so there's a zillion things. So to have someone who is youthful and energetic has been beneficial to me. But I also am the kind of person that I like a certain level of quality, even though that hasn't always been the case with some of the videos that we've put out in the last couple of years, because I've been doing things on my own. But I want it to... Our Blessed Mother deserves the best. Our Lord Jesus Christ deserves the best. And so that's what we want to be able to give. If we're witnessing on their behalf, we want to be able to provide the best. But for me, it takes a long time for me to envision what that best thing might be. It's the reason why when I'm working on a painting or a drawing, oftentimes I'll get to a certain point where it looks really good, but it's not done. And I'll put it on an easel, and I need to stare at it for like many weeks, many days. And you know, Ben Barron came over on, I think it was Friday, and we did massive cable hiding in the studio. So that was a big thing. Well, we got to that point because like a month before, I had a bunch of the equipment. We took advantage of Black Friday and we ordered some of the last equipment we needed. I had him come over, and we talked about this, tripods everywhere. And I looked at the studio in the office. I'm like, this is not what I had in my head. But I didn't know how to merge the vision I had with the technology reality of all these cables and all these tripods. And if you're going to have 3 cameras, you're going to have 3 tripods. If you're going to have 3 lights, you got to have 3 more tripods. If you're going to have 3 more microphones, you got to have 3 more tripods. And so, I mean, literally, I'm not kidding you. We had them all over the place. And if we're going to do 4 microphones for what we're dealing with, how do we do that? By the way, we could also do this setup. You and I could be sitting on chairs over there, and I have longer microphones a microphone stand that we could prop up. I got that worked out too.
For the Shure microphones?
Yeah. So we have, because we have the backups now, and then so anyway.
Okay, cool.
But when Ben came over that one time over a month ago, set everything up, destroyed the office or the studio, basically destroyed it. I can't work in chaos, but I had to just put blinders on and ignore it. And I told Ben Barron, and by the way, if you've never picked up on this, our friends Mac and Catherine, they have a son named Ben, and they have a son named Sam. That happened before we met them, because we also have a son named Sam and a son named Ben. So I always have to I don't call Ben Barron Ben. The other day I called him Benny several times, because that's what I call our Ben. I'm like, Benny. I'm like, why am I saying that? That's
our son's
That's too
name.
intimate. That's too. I call him Ben Barron. When I text him, even I type out Ben Barron. When I text Sam Barron, I text out Sam Barron. I'll say whatever I was going to say. Or if I'm calling out, even if our children aren't there, I say Sam Barron. Anyway, that's the thing. But I told Ben Barron that we just need to leave all that stuff set up, because I have to stare at it. I have to be uncomfortable, because that's going to motivate me to work, number one. And number two, I just need to envision it. But one thing that he did that he doesn't realize he did, and I'm going to put a pin in that. One thing he did, because this past Friday when he came over, he goes, we were more productive today than any of the other days. And I tried to explain to him, I said, well, you'd be surprised, because there is the amount of hours that you work, and then there's the level of productivity. And for me, a lot of my productivity, and this frustrates me, I don't like this about me, but it's a truth. A lot of the productivity that happens is what happens in all the thinking, and why I have insomnia oftentimes, and why I just can't, everywhere I go, I'm thinking about the work that we're trying to do for God. That could not have happened over this last month had he not come over, and had he not positioned 3 cameras in 3 particular places in the studio that I hadn't been thinking about. I said, I want it to pick up over here and here and here. And so we just set up the cameras on tripods, and I went, oh, okay. And then suddenly I could start envisioning, how do I attach those cameras onto the walls? How do we hide those cables? How do we set up this permanent setup? And so he has no idea of just that little thing that he did. It spurred 3 to 4 weeks of deep thought and searching for answers and all this kind of stuff. And now we have these polls and everything. And you would just be amazed at the level of complexity in this. I'm excited because of the level of complexity in the studio and how much flexibility it gives us, but at the same time, how clean and how, quite honestly, beautiful. Because what leads people to Jesus? Beauty leads people to Jesus. And so if it looks good, people are going to pay more attention. That's just the way it is. Most of the YouTubers that you watch, if their videos are ugly, you don't watch them. If their videos sound bad, you don't watch them. So now we have this beautiful setup for God, and I'm just so excited that we can be able to do so much. And so that's Ben played a huge role in that. And then once I felt like I had everything in place, that started with, he put those 3 cameras in those 3 places, and they're not exactly in that same place, but it got me thinking that now I was able to start running everything. And then I had this new vision, and he came over and I said, this goes that. And he was like, oh, good idea. And so like, to go back to what you said, he gets excited, right?
Yeah.
And then his excitement over my idea that I thought was a good idea, but I wasn't sure it was a good idea until he went, oh, and you see this 20-year-old redhead, eyes light up, and he's super excited. But I will say one thing about Ben Barron. I'm going to tease him a little bit. When we're trying to test the lights in the studio, this kid, and his own parents talk about this kid, he's got bright red hair and he's got pale skin. He is a reflector of all light. And so like I would sit down and we're like trying to do tests, and I'd sit down on one of the chairs, and he'd point the camera at me, and he's like, how's that? And I'm like, I'm looking over at the monitor. I'm like, that looks okay. All right. And then I'd get up and say, you sit down because I want to look at it a little bit closer. And I'm like, holy cow. So we have
super bright.
We have to figure out how do we get a diffuser just surrounding Ben's face and head. It's like, but yeah, I tell you what, he is just, he gave me so many great ideas. I am not a Google fan. I mean, I like the Google stuff, but I don't, he is all in, and he has helped me to automate a lot of the stuff so that I can walk in now and I can tell the
speak to your
I
office.
can speak to that device, and so many things will come alive. And we're I'm telling you, by the end of 2023, we're going to have it. It's going to be a well-oiled machine for all these different programs that we're going to do. It's going to be rough going these first few months. Just this morning, you and I were like, should we record this? Should we do video? And you're like, you got to let me know, Greg. You got to let me know. You got to give me advance warning. But yeah. So anyway.
I see the key for me as a female video and audio host with now more video is I'm just going to have to get over the hair and makeup. I just have to. I'm just going to have to.
Either that or you never walk into the studio unless you're ready to go on film.
See, because I don't like the makeup. I don't.
Well, then don't do the makeup.
I
only
wear it for very special occasions.
You do not need to do it. Listen, you keep talking to me about my clothes that I'm going to wear on this, and I get it. You're like, I'm representative of Rosary Army. I need to look professional. But at the same time,
for adventures, that's fine. But for catechism class in particular,
really,
that's a teaching capacity, and I feel like the stakes are higher, and it's more befitting to your sense of manliness to wear the collared shirt. I'm just saying this as a wife. Just do this. Just do this for me as your wife.
So there's all that. So we talked about the final tally for Rosary Army. We're very excited. Thank you to all of you who supported the apostolate. There's so much in store. You don't want to hear all the details. Like I said, I think about a lot of things. There's so much more in my head. I'm barely even scratching the surface of what we hope to accomplish this year. We raised more money in 1 month than we ever have in any other giving campaign for Rosary Army. We're talking about, it was pretty cool that back in 2006, we did that giving campaign for combined Rosary Army SQPN giving campaign. So we helped start up SQPN, and so we were trying to raise like $40,000 for Rosary Army, $40,000 for SQPN, so that we could focus on that stuff full time on a shoestring budget. So that required 2 different nonprofits, 2 different audiences to raise up just that $80,000 back then, and we blew it out of the water by $50,000 just in 1 month, and it took 2 months for that. And it's very hopeful. Plus, we know we've been told by people because of tax purposes, they were waiting until after the first of the year to make a donation and that kind of thing.
Right. So we know that there's going to be more January
more help.
Revenue, which is like, wow, thanks be to God. So
it's just, it's amazing.
Beautiful.
One of the things that I was contemplating, and I was reading in Liturgy of the Hours this morning, and just, when I think about this new year, and one of the things that I came to me in prayer last year was my biggest priority every day. And this came pretty strongly, and it might sound a little superstitious, and I hope it doesn't, but I felt very strongly, I was told, as long as I pray my Liturgy of the Hours and my Rosary every day, everything else will be taken care of. Because I get really worked up about, am I doing enough? Am I doing, what else do I need to do? Am I doing it right? Is it going to be good enough? Are people, and it's just like, what that told me is stay tethered and everything else work out. And I've shared, I think it's the Tuesday of week 2, which will be tomorrow in the Liturgy of the Hours. The antiphons are all surrender everything to God and he'll take care of the rest. And the last couple of years in particular have been learning that. Just surrender it. But then once you get to the point where, we just raised all this money and we kept having to surrender, we had a goal that we weren't going to raise, but I was like, it became evident last week we weren't going to raise the 200. It doesn't matter. We've been given enough that we have our marching orders. So what are you going to do with it? And how well can you, and so thinking about that and then trying to allow that to excite me, right? Not to worry me, but to excite me. And so even yesterday, though, it was a Sunday. I'm coming up here in the studio and I'm messing with the screens and the lights and just playing. And part of what I'm thinking, because it can be very overwhelming when I stop and think about we're trying to get 5 or 6 different shows and courses and things going all at once, and how am I going to do it? And we need to get back to catechism class, and we want to start recording that in a different way. It's very intimidating. But if we take that bird by bird approach, just a little bit, every time I come in here, just make a graphic, eventually it's all there. And so even this morning when you and I were trying to set up this, we weren't sure if we were going to do the video of this. And then all of a sudden, here we are, we're doing it. Because we just said, well, let's just adjust that light, this, and then boom, now we have it going. That bird by bird approach, where I'm going with this is, so here we are at the beginning of this year, and you probably set some sort of New Year's resolution for yourself. We talked about liturgical New Year's resolutions, which are much better because you set some sort of goal to grow in holiness this year. So the great thing is you have everything that you need right now to do what you need to do to start growing in holiness right now. You have, even if you don't have a rosary in your pocket. I can't pray the rosary every day because I haven't gotten one from Greg and Jen from Rosary Army yet. Okay, do you have 10 fingers? Okay, you don't have 10 fingers? Do you have 10 toes? There's your decade right there. My point is, can you go outside and find 10 pebbles?
Can you count to 10?
Can you get 10 macaroni noodles out of your pantry? There you go. There's your decade. Keep praying a Hail Mary on each one of those things. Meditate on the life of Jesus Christ. What happens when you do that? Well, it's a bird by bird approach. What's bird by bird? We haven't talked about bird by bird in a long time. Okay, so our cameras just went blank on us as we're recording. See, this is what I was just talking about. It doesn't have to be perfect.
This is a working show. It's okay. It's okay. And I wrote down bird by bird. You can get back to that once we figure out the camera.
I hit the button, and that one came back, and it looks like we're back to recording again. And this button over here, let's see if I just hit the button on top. Yep. So, Jennifer, go over and just click the shutter on camera 3, and we should be all right. So there's a learning lesson, and that's a bird by bird. Bird by bird was a writing book by a woman named Anne Lamott. And I read it years and years ago, and here's the whole premise. And I always mess up the story of how the origin of this. But basically, her father loved bird watching, and he had this huge book that was full of birds. And she was looking at it, and she just was kind of overwhelmed because she was trying to figure out how he collects birds, right? How when he finds a bird, he marks it in the book. And how is he ever going to fill up this book of all of the birds that he's seen? And she told him that she just felt overwhelmed by the idea of him trying to do that. He says, I won't see them all at once. I will see them bird by bird. And eventually, over the course of time, you will see all the birds in that book. And so that's actually become a bit of a shorthand in our own house of just take it bird by bird. When things start to become overwhelming, just take it bird by bird. What's one little thing you can do today? I've been trying to put out a serialized version of a novel of mine on Substack. I haven't done it for the last couple of weeks. Starting to get a little antsy about it. That's okay. I still have been getting chapters out, and I will get that book finished chapter by chapter, bird by bird. So my point in saying that is sometimes when we go into these new years, we're like, well, how am I ever going to get into shape? You do it one workout at a time. Don't worry about your 90th day of the workout or your 6th month of the workout. Worry about today's workout. If you want to grow in your faith, what's the thing that you can do directly today? Well, I can go and I could do 3 hours of adoration today, and I could pray the full, all 4 sets of mysteries of the Rosary, and I'm going to read the Bible for an hour. Well, is that realistic? Maybe today, if you have the day off and no one needs you, then you could do that. Great, go do that. But if you want to be successful on a regular basis, what is the bird that you need to collect today? What is the spiritual bird that you need to collect today? What's the one thing that you could do today that's going to help you, just like that one workout will help you grow in strength? It's not going to you're not going to go from, being a couch potato to Arnold Schwarzenegger with one workout. It doesn't happen that way. Well, the same thing, you can't go from being a deviant to St. Thomas Aquinas with one prayer session. That happens over the course of a lifetime. And thank God, God gives us that lifetime. God gives us the opportunity. First Peter talks about the fact, that thank God God gives us the time because he yearns for everyone to be converted and everyone to grow closer to him, including us, so that we can grow in the holiness that's going to be required for us to be able to cross over into heaven and be with him. So as we're going into this new year, what's the bird that you're going to collect every day? And for me, it goes back to, it's really easy to get stressed out about all the stuff that we're trying to do. If I pray my rosary and I do my liturgy of the hours, morning and evening prayers, office of readings, if I make that my priority, it really is kind of amazing how much stuff gets done. Let's go back to November 28th. We had collected $0 for our giving campaign on November 28th. $0 towards $200,000. How in the world are we going to raise $200,000? Well, as of today, we have 133,000 birds that were collected, $1 at a time. And that's pretty satisfying. I don't have the whole book, but that's okay. We have made significant progress. And so I share that with you so that as you're going into this new year, particularly if you're feeling frustrated with your job, how am I ever going to get a new job? Well, what's one step that you take towards that next job? It might take 48 days to the job you love, which is actually the name of a book. It might take 6 months. It might take a year, but what's that? What can you do today that's going to bring you to that point? Don't worry so much about that end goal. That's, I think, what keeps a lot of people from growing closer to God is they're like, I'm unworthy of God. You are unworthy of God. I'm unworthy of heaven. You are unworthy of heaven. What are you going to start doing today so that when you die, you're a saint? What are you going to start doing today in your faith life so that when you die, you are in the presence of God in heaven? And I think that's significant.
When we were driving home from Mass just the other day, you were sharing an email exchange between you and Father Dana Christensen, where...
And now we got to explain who he is.
Yes. Now, he recently passed away, and so we are praying for the repose of his soul always, and he was a very holy, holy priest.
And his intercession.
He suffered greatly in the final years of his life because he had that terrible, debilitating illness of ALS.
Yeah, Lou Gehrig's.
And but we had the great honor. Like, I did not really communicate with him directly, but I know you did, Greg. And
you mean when he was sick?
Well, before he died, you communicated with him via email.
Yeah.
And so you were researching something, and you stumble upon an email exchange from him, and you shared like this very profound bit of encouragement that he had for you. It was a very reassuring and loving thing to say. And when you shared that with me on the drive home yesterday, I was like, wait, say that again. That was amazing. Why did we forget that? That is like, can you remember, like, you bring Mary into your home was the prompt.
So I mean, he and I were trading emails, and he was already in the midst of ALS, and this was about a year and a half ago. And I think it was, I remember writing him an email from the lobby of the hotel in Colorado when we went out there for our friend Tom's funeral. And just already, again, I wasn't taking my own advice. I wasn't looking at bird by bird. I'm looking at all these things that need to get done, and I'm not getting these things done, and feeling a little overwhelmed by all the things that needed to get done for Rosary Army. And when I am trying to reconcile all these things in my head, I sent him an email actually responding to a previous email. I told him I just feel totally unworthy to be doing this thing with Rosary Army. But at the same time, Rosary Army has sort of taken over our house over the last, X number of years. Now I'm at 20. So at that time it was 18. And everything that we've done over all these years keeps pointing us back to this is what we're supposed to be doing, even when we kind of rebel against it and we say, no, we can do it, but we're also going to be doing these other things as well. And just one thing that, and I said, I don't know how we will be sustained. I don't know how we'll be able to keep doing this. This is before we tried to raise money last year, is before we tried to raise money again this year. And I just I was lacking in a level of trust.
And confidence.
Yeah. Confidence in myself and quite honestly, trust in God. And I've had to spend a lot of time praying to God about that, of like, just there's a trust factor with God our Father. And Father Dana wrote back to me. And again, take into consideration, I mean, these words of wisdom that he shared, the man already at this time was typing with his eyeballs. Literally, he wrote me this long email. And the way that he did it was he had a computer that, because he couldn't use his hands anymore, he had a computer that tracked his eyes, and he would pick letters and words, and then that's how he would compose an email to me. And in this eyeball written email, he gave the encouragement. Number one, he said, you're not worthy to be running Rosary Army. You're not worthy of all the things that God has done, and yet Jesus loves you anyway. And he says, you have brought Mary into your home, and Jesus is not going to disappoint his mother, and he's not going to let his mother to be on her own. And basically, he was encouraging us in the way that, I imagine, you think about, we've been talking a lot about John the Apostle lately and how Jesus told him, here's your mom. And we know that the gospel says that John brought Mary into his home. And his gospel is so different. We talked about this when Shane Kapler was on the show with us a few weeks back. The idea that, John's gospel is so different because he was inspired by Mary and the deep theological understanding that Mary had of her own son. And we've brought Mary into our house. Do we accept that? Yes, we now do. We've brought her into our house. Well, then we don't have anything to worry about. God is going to take care of his mom. And, we just celebrated Mary, Mother of God, yesterday. It's like we don't have anything to worry about. She is here because of this work that we're doing, because of our consecration to Jesus through Mary. And it's not about us, but we are going to be taken care of. She is here, and so Jesus is going to take care of his mom. And by extension, she'll take care of us.
And at the core of this sort of this dialogue, this interior dialogue about what we believe and will we act accordingly, this is about faith in ourselves versus faith in Christ. And we have this tendency to think, well, I can't do it. We keep looking at ourselves to define our level of faith as just in us, which is wrong. But yet we do it anyway, but it's wrong. But if we reorient ourselves, like ad orientem, to Christ, if we just stay oriented to Christ and put our faith there, then you can't lose. No matter what happens, you can't lose. It is the winning move. And that's, in large respects, how I felt about this giving campaign. Whatever the number we get, we can't lose because God's going to take care of it. That's our God. I just look at what happened with my mother and father, my late parents. My dad only put away a certain amount of dollars, which according to financial, analysts, it may not look like an impressive number. It's like, that's not going to go very far, because they're just looking at it through the world's definition of success and preparing for one's future. But our God can make anything work. He can take any little humble amount and it will be enough. I mean, that's the loaves and fishes story that you commented on the last show.
It's interesting that that's the direction that you went. We got a message on our Discord server for our patrons. Jim posted up there. Did you see the message from him? I mean, you just started to answer his question. Jim said over on Discord, in November, I was thinking about how the church tends to increase focus on death and being prepared for it and praying for the dead. With the recent deaths of your relative, meaning your mom, and of a former pope, which we haven't even talked about, it further keeps that in mind. He says, death is a subject that is often avoided in culture today, and yet we all die. Many people don't have funeral plans, wills, and other things prepared. That places a burden on others. one might consider touching on such subjects. And so we'll touch on that a little bit.
Yes.
Now going back to what you just said a moment ago with your dad who had a blue collar job. Mm-hmm. He worked for the post office for the last part of his career. He put money away and he invested money wisely so that your mom would be taken care of after he was gone. And thank God he did that, because there's no way that we could have paid for the memory care that your mother needed the last 3 years of her life. There's no way that we could have immediately paid for her funeral expenses, which it equaled up to about 10 grand.
Yeah. And just in case you're wondering, because I know how to, prepare and plan for a funeral, because you don't know how to do that until you're thrown into the situation. But that was on the low end. If you are on a budget, but you definitely want to bury your loved one in ground, full body burial, you can anticipate it being about $10,000 for that.
That's because of the funeral home?
There's a funeral home expense.
Because of the cemetery itself. You buy the plot and the grave marker.
There's a cemetery expense that's separate from the funeral home.
And then, at your church, even though you're a parishioner, it's customary to give stipends to the various people that are there, giving of their time. So if you have music, if you need to have the police escort, which because we're in the Atlanta area, it needed to happen. Otherwise, we would have had a whole bunch of cars arriving over the course of probably 45 minutes before we could have actually done the burial because of stoplights. You needed to pay, you give a stipend to the altar servers and the priests and the other people that are there. And so it adds up. And we're very thankful that, fortunately, your mom had that money because your dad had planned. Now, it obviously has made me think a lot about, should you and I be doing a better job of planning our funerals? Because for many years, I've said that when I die, just take me over to the monastery that's on the eastern side of Atlanta, close to where we used to live. They have a green burial spot, and I just always assumed it would be a lot less expensive because you can't be embalmed. The caskets are just plain pine wood boxes. You can be wrapped up in a cloth and just be dropped in the ground with a cloth. And so I just kind of figured, well, that's the easiest and less expensive thing. Just go do that. No matter what, you're going to be spending some money on a funeral. So we'd be wise to be, have those funds set aside so that our kids and whoever goes first, you or me, the other one doesn't have to worry about it. It's already there. Now, your dad did do some pre-planning, but he had planned for he and your mom to be cremated. We had Dr. Scott Hahn on the program a while back. He wrote a book called Hope to Die. That book really impacted you, especially because you actually finished the book.
Chapter 12.
Versus me. Chapter 12 in that book.
Chapter 12. That's all I'm saying. Just read chapter 12.
Well, but then you got in a conversation with a friend of yours who, you just were talking about this more, from a scriptural basis. You never hear about bodies in the Bible being burned. Burn up the bodies and you have their cremains and put them in necklaces and distribute them and that kind of, you never hear those kinds of things, right? And so it hits you. It's like, well, the Bible talks about you bury the dead, you care for the dead, and that we believe in the resurrection of the dead. And we believe that we will have the resurrected bodies, but our bodies, these vessels, are going to be glorified bodies. So what does that mean? And we're not experts in this area. Please know this, but we have enough of a opinion on it based off of our teachings of our faith. That for many, many years, cremation was discouraged by the Catholic Church. Now it's allowed. You can certainly be cremated, but
it's begrudgingly permitted.
It's begrudgingly permitted, but at the same
that's
time,
about as good as you can get.
But at the same time, if you pay attention to what the teachings are, those remains are still very precious, and they should be treated as such. And they need to be laid to rest. When we die, we should be laid to rest. And are we being laid to rest if our burnt up body is sitting precariously on a mantle? Are we at rest if we're still at risk of having our remains knocked over with a broom or a cat and spilled all over the floor? And I know that that's kind of an exaggeration from a bad comedy movie. That's where there's, but at the same time, so it's given us great pause. And your dad was cremated. And that also was a big weird thing for us because he was cremated, and then the box was just at your mom's house for the first year, and then when she came and moved in with us, she brought your dad's cremains from Georgia to Indiana, and then
we held on
even
to
then
it.
we're like, he needs to be laid to rest, and those cremains were laid to rest in Indiana. And so your dad's cremains are in one place, and your mom's body was buried here in Georgia. But it really, we feel very strongly that we need to have our bodies laid to rest when we die. And so there's a cost that's going to be associated with that. So to Jim's point, how do we prepare for that? And again, why do people not plan for these kinds of things? Well, my goodness, I don't have $10,000 to slap down on a plot and funeral preparations right now and all these kinds of things. And your dad did, as I started to say, tried to plan. He bought cremation for your mom and him.
And so that was as far as he went.
That was as far as he went. There was no plot or place to put it in.
Yeah.
But so we could have easily taken your mom's body and had it cremated because your dad had already paid for it. But we did not feel right doing that for the reasons that we just outlined. But how do you pay for that kind of thing if you don't have any of the money? Well, again, let's go back to the bird by bird. How do you save for anything? How do you save for a vacation properly? How do you save for a new car? You start doing it now. You put $10 aside now. You put $10 in an envelope or $10, create a new savings account. Put that money in there and just let it sit. And you add a little bit over time. You put $10 and then you put another $10. And then guess what? After 10 weeks, you have $100, right? And it adds up over time. And so while you might die before you have the full amount, when you die, you're going to have something there. And really, that takes the stress out of everything if you think about it. It requires a little bit of sacrifice and discipline now, but in the end, it removes all of the stress. And that's a huge thing. And so overall, the planning of your mom's funeral, you and I just had to go find a plot, and your mom had the money for it, paid. We needed to have a funeral home. We found it. We needed the money. Your mom had the money, paid. And so how wonderful of a gift was that from both your parents that we were able to do that easily?
Yeah. And honestly, you see and understand why there is a limit to the amount of death planning you can do for yourself, because there's so many unknowns. And obviously my parents could never sort of predict where they would be physically at the moment of their passing. And so it was left up to the adult children to make the final decision as to where the cemetery should even be. Like, the location can't really be determined that far in advance because there's too many life situations that could change where that person was residing. Like, I never could have known that my mother was going to die in a city, 35 miles from where we live in another city. And so and which church, will be celebrating the funeral mass. Well, you don't know. You don't even know where you're going to be living 20 years from now. So there's only so far you can go. The only thing you can really do is have a plan for the financing, and then everything else will be decided later. But it would have been nice to know those basic things, like contact this church if possible. If you're within this, geographical distance, then let's go with this church. Let's go with this cemetery, and let's go with this funeral home. And here's something I now understand about cemeteries in general, because there is a great amount of difference in cost depending on the cemetery you choose. And cemeteries that are like a little further out from the main thoroughfare, like the main highway, tend to get a little more affordable. The ones that are closer and more visible to higher traffic tends to be a little more expensive. And so I was like, okay, that's good to know. So, and then you just kind of ask the people in the business, what are the cemeteries around here? Where do most people go? Because it's not obvious to us, that information. So once you determine your funeral home, and what they do is they prepare the body. They are the ones who, it's their job to collect the body when your loved one has passed. They're the ones who come out, gather them, and then they store the body until you have finished making your arrangements as to where the body will be buried. But it's their job to lovingly care for and maintain the deceased. And so that is where the cost is going. But they know, that's their whole business model, is to know how to answer all the other questions that the family has, like, where should I take my loved one to be buried? And so they gave us some great suggestions. They knew our budget. And so we just kind of approached it in that manner. And it was very, very helpful. And everyone is so kind and so patient and very gentle. And we were able to sort of control the cost. But once we were in it, I'll never forget that moment when we sat down in the office of the funeral home director. This is before Mom had even passed away, but we realized we need to go ahead and pick the casket.
Yep.
And so that was a very surreal thing, to go into the room that it's not quite like a store, but it is a room that has all the available caskets on display and all their price points. And that you're going to have to walk into this room. But then when you walk into this room knowing this is for, my loved one, my mother. And so it carries a different emotional weight when you know the body that's going into the casket now. But yeah, the prices, wow, blew me away. Like on the low end, $1,250. On the high end, $10,000 just in the casket.
Just for the casket
alone.
Man, do not bury me in a $10,000 casket.
Yeah. And so we chose something that we felt like my dad would have made that. So it was a very, very it was a wooden casket that looked like made lovingly by a carpenter. So it was very humble, simple, but ornate, just a little ornateness to it. So it wasn't completely like a straight pine box. There was some ornamentation, some mold going on, mold trim, not mold,
not
as
mold.
in bacteria growth.
Can I say something though?
Yeah.
When you said it looks like something your dad would make, I didn't point this out to anybody.
Okay.
I'm going to bring it up now, but it's really funny to hear you say that because there was this one hinge on the door, on one of the top doors of the casket. There's one hinge. It was slightly off, and the two door parts that open up on the casket were slightly out of alignment. And it just made me think about that one cabinet in our old house that your dad could never figure out how to fix. I couldn't figure out how to fix. I'm like, yep, that totally tracks with that being like your dad, because even that casket had a little bit of imperfection in the alignment of the hinges. And I noticed that, like, this is so bad. This is the weird things that go through my brain. I noticed it right before your mom's casket went into the ground, and we're there at the cemetery, and I look over and I'm like, that door's crooked.
Well, and that's okay. It truly is. And so we were able to get that casket, I think, for like $1,500. And I'm like, that's plenty. That's wonderful. Yeah. It doesn't need to be this $10,000, sort of thing. And here's the other thing that I sort of questioned the funeral home director. It's like they all come with a pillow, like a pillow to go to sleep in. And I'm like, what is the point of the pillow? I mean, I'm not pushing back on the cost of it or anything, but just why? I mean, it seems a little bit unnecessary. And he goes, well, because they're asleep, and in scripture, we hear many references to sleep is equivalent to death.
Yeah. And
so it mirrors and plays into that symbolism of laying your deceased loved one at rest. So there's a pillow there, and it just makes them look like they're just sleeping. And they have a little blanket pulled up to them like they're just sleeping. And it is a very lovely image, and it was very beautiful to see, and it was easy to see. So anyway, I really appreciated that. And those little, I guess we're going to be doing this in the next few weeks as we're podcasting. More memories are just going to come to the surface surrounding my mother's passing. And that's part of grieving, is when the memory comes, allow them to come, feel them, absorb them, and then they just fade away, and then a new memory comes in. And so I can't thank you enough for all of your prayers. They've been very just appreciated, and I have felt truly good and calm and at peace. And I can't thank you enough for that. So truly, thank you.
Well, I think that's it. That's our first show of 2023. We've been so busy with all the stuff behind the scenes that we haven't yet planned the next batch of interviews, but I have some on the radar of who I need to arrange. So you're going to get some talky talks for the next few weeks from us, I think, as we get back into our own routine, getting back to school for you and Lily, getting back into the studio and recording and planning out. But we have so many great things, as we shared at the beginning of the show. Thank you for being here with us. Spread the news around. Let other people know about the work of Rosary Army, and that if you know people that listen to podcasts and they're not listening to Catechism class or Ventures in Imperfect Living, maybe recommend them in the new year. We can get maybe we'll have 1,000 new listeners by the end of the year if we just get them bird by bird, right? And so you're
One bird at a time.
You're our bird collectors is how that works. And so thank you for doing that. We love hearing from you, your beautiful voices, as well as your emails. If you want to record a voicemail and send it to us, we'll play it on the show. And you get your vocal name endorphins when you do so, or just send us an email. All that, you can send it to feedback@gregandjennifer.com. We thank you so much for being here with us each and every week. Thank you again to all of you people who sponsored Rosary Army during our giving campaign, as well as our ongoing patrons. We love you all so much. And as always, pray your rosary every single day. Let's see if my buttons are going to work.
And do whatever it takes to be holy.
From De Montfort Studios, rosaryarmy.com, home of schoolofmary.com. I'm Greg. This is Jennifer. Thank you for being with us. God bless. Now, how do I stop all this stuff? That's the question.